I can have your attention, please. Thank you for your patience. We want to welcome everyone here at the chapel as well as all of those viewing online. The service of Mr. Burt Fainman. Just a few announcements before we begin. The interment will take place at West Lawn Cemetery in Norwich. For those of you driving to the cemetery, we'll make sure that you get the proper flags and stickers for your car, as well as using your emergency flashers while in procession. The Shiva will be at the Fainman residence at 1209 North Astor Street, Unit 8N in Chicago. Today, after the interment, until 9 p.m., Thursday from 6:30 to 9, Friday from 3 to 5:30, Saturday evening 7:30 to 9:30 p.m., and Sunday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. All this information is listed in the service folders you received today. If you didn't receive one, they are available as you exit, and this information is also listed online. Following this service, I will ask the following people to come forward to serve as pallbearers. They will be Daniel Goldwyn, Paul Goldwyn, Norman Bobbins, Jerry Bear, Penny Seven Shore, and Rachel Weinberg. And as honorary pallbearers, Howard Goldberg and Harold Sherman. Officiating today will be Rabbi Michael Siegel, Rabbi Dror Chenkin Gold, Rabbi Benji Forrester, Cantor Rachel Brook, and Cantor Elizabeth Berkey, all from the Anshe Emet Synagogue. And just a gentle reminder for those of you who have cell phones here in the chapel, please place them in the silent mode or turn them off completely. That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Psalm 121. Esaina el hecharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, ose shamayim va'aretz. Ayitein lamut raglecha, ayanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan, shomei Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzidcha uvoecha, me'ata v'yad olam.
A song of ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and coming, now and forevermore.
Psalm 23. Adonai roi lo echsad binod asher yarbitzeini al mei menuchot yenahaleini nafshi shovev yanchini b'maglei tzedek leman shemo משפטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
In the booklets you received, you'll find the 23rd Psalm in the inner page. I invite you to read with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. On this day, we join in the spirit of the psalm. We are walking in the valley of the shadow. And we are here to perform the mitzvah of Livia, that is to escort Burt Fainman to his final resting place. And as we walk with Burt this day, we walk with his memory. And I know that there is not a person here who doesn't have a memory of Burt on this day, who hasn't marveled at the spirit in the man. And his family, well, they carry that burden, the blessing and the burden of that memory on this day. We remember Martin and Mary Fainman on this day, loving and beloved parents. And to you, Marion, you and Burt have been together for 53 years of marriage and years before that as well. What a journey you have had. And what a force you have been in Burt's life. We pray for your comfort on this day. And Marna, I don't believe it would be possible to create a more loving daughter and a more beloved daughter. We pray for your comfort. And Dan, you were quite literally Burt's son. And you honored him as a son would do. You chose to spend Burt's last night with him to ensure that he not be alone in that difficult moment. Hannah and Alana, you were beloved granddaughters. Burt reveled in the two of you. And our hope and prayer is that you will carry his memory forward, not only within your hearts, but also emulate his best attributes. Rachel, the beloved cousin, is here today, and I know the family is comforted by your presence. we have a tradition of tearing, kriya. And it is an acknowledgement that something vital has been torn away from us in death. And our rabbis wisely attached a bracha, blessing, to this act to remind us that we must never forget, even for a moment, the blessings that Burt's life represents this day, and will continue to represent in the minds of all those who knew and loved him. So I'm going to ask the immediate family to please rise. And it should be noted that along with Marion and Marna, Dan, Hannah, and Alana have also chosen to wear the ribbon. In the book of Job, we're told the story of a person who suffered in life. While there were those who came to Job and said, life isn't worth living, life is only darkness without light, Job responded with these words, which I think Burt also in his own way lived. Adonai Natan, please repeat after me. Adonai Lakach. God is taken away. Yehi Shem Adonai B'vorach. Praise be the name of the Lord forever and ever. There's this Hasidic story of a Rebbe who asked his Hasidim the following question. If you could bring anything back from the temple of old, what would you bring? One student said he would bring back the menorah. Another student said he would bring back the Holy Ark. Another, he would bring back the incense that was part of the temple ritual. Finally, one of the disciples asked their Rebbe, if you could bring back anything from the temple, what would you bring? He thought for a minute and he said, all of your answers are good ones. But if I had that opportunity, my choice would be a different one. I would bring back the fire from the altar. In the Bible, there was a man who had a holy fire burning inside of him. His name was Bezalel. He's the only artisan identified in the Torah, aside from God, of course. He had a hand in all parts of the Mishkan, that menorah, the Ark of the Covenant. And the Torah introduces Bezalel this way. Re'eh, karati b'shem Bezalel ben Ur, ben Chur lamate Yehuda, v'amalei oto ruach Elohim b'chochma, uvitvuna, uv'da'at b'chol melacha. See, I have singled out Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I have endowed him with a divine spirit, of skill, ability, and knowledge in every craft. The fire of the altar burned inside of Bezalel, and it's instructive that Burt Fainman's Hebrew name was Bezalel. And he had a very powerful fire burning inside of him. It was a fire that could keep you warm, but at times that fire could burn hot. I know this from personal experience. The fire that burned within Burt burned with Marion as well, with Marna, Dan, and Hannah, and Alana. And at the end of his life, that fire burned to hear yet another opera, another symphony, or the beautiful harmonies of Peter, Paul, and Mary. And Burt fought to live. My God, that man fought. But it was not to be. It wasn't really a fair fight, after all. On Friday, I spoke to Burt by phone. He roused himself to listen. We shared some pleasantries, and then I recited a prayer for healing, as I know he would want to hear. Then I invited him to say the Shema. And he paused for a moment, and then he agreed. So we said the Shema together. But then Burt did something that I've never witnessed before. He then went on to recite the entire Via Hafta. In such a beautiful, pure way. The fire from the altar never stopped burning within Burt Fainman, in our Bezalel. And the night before he died, Dan was with him. And in the morning, Marna was sitting next to him. She was crying, and Burt sensed it. It reflected that remarkable bond that this father and daughter shared. And he said to Marna, "Don't cry. Say Kaddish for me." Burt was a practical man. Don't just sit there with your feelings, he was telling Marna. Put them to use in a way that will raise you up and me up, in the words of our tradition. The fire of Yiddishkeit burned brightly within this man. Today, it is our privilege to celebrate that bright light that was Burt Fainman, our Bezalel. And it will be our privilege to hear from those who were warmed and inspired by that loving heart, that fire that burned within the man. So we'll hear from Rachel first, then Alana and Hannah, Dan, and finally, it'll be our privilege to hear words from Marna.
First, I just want to thank everyone. He would be so touched to see so many people here celebrating his life, and so happy to know that there are so many people here to comfort those that he loved best. I watched my hands fold the blazer, the dark pants, the dark shirt, and my mind says, wait, what? I tell work I'll be away for a funeral. I type an outgoing email while my mind says, wait, what do you mean I won't see Burt? He's a pillar in my life. He holds my history, one of the last connections to my mother. I'm 3. Uncle Marty plays the fiddle while Burt plays guitar and sings A Fox Went Out on a Chilly Night and Puff the Magic Dragon, songs that brought everyone together, filled the room with love, Burt in the center of it all. Years later, there is Burt, who lets me hold his infant daughter as long as I understand not to let her head fall, that I must sit on the floor in case I drop baby Marna, that my mother must sit beside me just in case. I'm in high school arguing with Burt about the motivation of a character in the film Chariots of Fire. He listens to me, looks me straight in the eye, doesn't dismiss me as many adults dismiss a teenager. When I'm a mother of young boys, they are taught as I was taught. These are your cousins. You are close. You love each other. End of story. We are family, the way my mom and Burt were family. 2 only children who chose each other as siblings, with Wally, their shared adopted parent. Years will pass of tight connections, and the normal irritations of life cannot break their bond. They always return to each other. When Burt had his massive heart attack, my mom paced the kitchen for days until he was out of danger. Years later, Burt calls me continuously to tell me that something is wrong with my mom. She's losing too much weight too fast. I come to Chicago to pack up my parents' apartment. It is Burt and Marion who are concerned that I am alone in the apartment, who check in on me, ask if I need anything. Do I want to join them for Halloween party at Bryn Mawr? When my mom dies, it is Burt who calls me on my birthday because he knew there would be a hole where her phone call used to be. And every February 12th, it was I who called Burt because I knew he felt the same hole. Our conversations weaving between how's my husband, how are the boys, what do you think of what's happening in Israel, can you believe the decisions the president's made, how's Hannah and Alana? Seamlessly, our relationship moved from childhood into adulthood. Seamlessly, because Burt accepts me at each stage until we have true conversations, until he is a friend. This is a gift. To let the hierarchical relationship with children become the equality of adults. All those years ago with that massive heart attack that he wasn't supposed to survive, but he did survive, he always survived. It became part of the fabric of his life, so I stopped taking it as the warning of finite time. Until Marna called, and I knew this time it was different. Yet even the last few days of life, Burt was committed to living. On the phone, his voice filled with warmth. How's the family? What do you think of what's happening in Israel? His voice pushing to have the same warmth and energy and love for all of us, because Burt was still and always will be the center of a lot of love.
Burt Fainman, Papa Burt, an expert card player, a sommelier adjacent, a lover of learning, and the most dedicated family man we have come to look up to and admire so deeply. For as long as we can remember, Papa Burt has been a rock in our lives, a constant source of wisdom, of stories, of the heartiest laughter, of compassion, and a stellar monkey impression.
Papa Burt taught us what it meant to be dedicated full-heartedly to all the people you love. He never failed to be the unwavering supporter on the sidelines of every sports game, no matter the sport or the weather, just to watch and cheer us on. Before every game, my coach would ask me, "Will your grandpa be here today?" And without fault, the answer was always yes. There was never a doubt in any situation, big or small, he would be there.
Papa Burt was by far the most intelligent and fair person we've met. He used to repeatedly remind me, Hannah, life isn't fair. And yet through every interaction or situation, he strived for fairness.
He kept a tally on his phone on which one of us got the trundle bed versus the real bed at our weekly sleepovers to ensure complete fairness.
And after every single rule dispute or argument in Casino or Scrabble or Monopoly, he spent hours poring over various websites, finding the nuggets to prove our made-up rules wrong.
No matter the rules the two of us conjured up, he almost always came out on top. It was a fight to be Scrabble partners with Papa Burt because that was your best shot at victory.
To Papa Burt, we will always deal our cards 2 at a time for Casino, split the deck towards the dealer, and bluff as hard as we can when building.
One of us promises to always share the branzino with Grammy at dinner, but fight for fried chicken.
We will sing the Neartsot songs and 4 questions with utmost pride, though no one will lead them the way you always have.
We will forever be inspired by your fascination and absolute love of Judaism.
And we will always remember that the answer is blowing in the wind.
Papa Burt embodied the essence of many Jewish values that guided his life, and he taught and instilled in ours.
The concept of gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, permeated his every action, enriching every single one of our lives. And his never-ending pursuit of wisdom is something I hope to carry on. He exemplified a love of learning, not only through books, but through life experience.
Papa Burt led a life too full of love and laughter for us to encapsulate in these few minutes. Each life he touched, he filled with joy. It is our only hope to leave half the impact on others that he did.
Watching the way he looked at Grammy showed true love, affection, and respect. And nothing could ever compare to the pride that filled his eyes anytime my mom spoke. The way he loved those of us lucky enough to be in his life was evident at every single moment.
We are so lucky to have been on the receiving end of that. There will never be a person, a mensch, like our Papa Burt. There just never will be. He is a once-in-a-lifetime person, and we feel so honored to be able to know him as our grandpa.
May his memory be a blessing, and we have no doubt that it will be. It already is.
Sure, I'll go after my daughters. I did Google last night how to get through a speech without crying. I've already failed. In 2019, the United States Golf Association announced new Rule 5.6. This new rule states, quote, "Players should recognize that their pace of play affects others. They should play promptly throughout the round, such as by preparing in advance for each stroke and moving promptly between strokes and going to the next tee." This is key. A player should make a stroke in no more than 40 seconds and usually in less time, after the player is able to play without interference or distraction. For anyone who ever played golf with Burt or in any of the foursomes behind him, you will understand why I am citing this rule now when he is not here to argue with me about it. You see, not long after I started dating Marna and accompanying her to Bryn Mawr, I got to play golf with Burt. And it wasn't long after that the Bryn Mawr golf pros pulled me aside and asked me if I could help Burt play just a little faster. I declined to help. First, I was still trying to make a good impression on him, Marion, and Marna, so siding with the golf bureaucracy against the father of my girlfriend didn't sound like a good idea. And second, he beat me every time he played, so who was I to tell him what to do? In politics and combat, the losers are often accused of fighting the last war. Well, in this case, the USGA announced new Rule 5.6 in 2019 after Burt had largely stopped playing golf. So Burt, as the slow and steady competitor usually does, had the last laugh. He golfed at the pace that made him happy. But now the rest of us have to live under a time burden he never knew. To be honest, I'm a little surprised I found myself opening my remarks about Burt with a sports story. While sports, playing and watching, are a big part of Hannah's, Alana's, and my life, they were never really Burt's cup of tea. I remember once when Hannah and Alana were still quite young, they were watching a Notre Dame versus Michigan football game with me at our house. We had to leave the game to head down to Burt and Marion's apartment. So when we got there, the girls and I rushed into the den to put on the game. Now, it's really important you understand two important facts. First, Burt is an alum of the University of Michigan. And second, Notre Dame and Michigan are considered to have the most recognizable helmets in college football. Burt came into the den. He looked at us. He looked at the TV. He looked at us and said, "Who's playing?" Deep breaths was one of the things they said on Google. Burt and I were the only men in this now nearly 25-year-old official combo Goldwyn Fainman family. And on the surface, other than our gender, it might seem like we didn't have that much in common. And to be frank, I felt that way in the beginning. Of course, it didn't help that the first time we had dinner together at the Standard Club, Burt turned to me without warning and said, "So what do you want to do with your life?" As the years went by, Burt and I found a shared language and common passions: Israel, politics, musical theater, especially Les Mis and Fiddler on the Roof, dad jokes, good or bad, and Jewish culture were just some of the many things we knew we could always talk about. But the most important passion we shared was the love and devotion we felt for the women in our family. There is nothing Burt wouldn't do to comfort and care for Marion, Marna, Hannah, and Alana. His devotion to them was complete and unbreakable. Though I hope I showed to Burt over the past 28 years that I felt the same way. I used my last conversation with him less than 12 hours before he passed away to tell him I would do as he modeled, and I would take whatever steps were necessary to protect Marta, Marion, Hannah, and Alana. He heard me, and he told me he understood. Burt was a man comfortable in his own skin. He loved what he loved. He would log, track, and rate all the wine he drank in the app on his phone. He moved at his own pace, which could be infuriating on and off the golf course. His commitment to the Jewish people, Jewish culture, and our Jewish homeland was unquestioned and drove him to learn, to ask questions, and even to challenge Rabbi Siegel over the phone just days before he passed. One of the greatest gifts Burt and Marion gave us was in 2013 when they took all of us to Israel. Burt first went to Israel in 1960 on a mission. And while I knew this pre-6-day war trip had a profound impact on him, as he talked about going to certain vantage points where they could see into but not visit the old city, I think his actual favorite memory was that he rode up an elevator in the King David Hotel with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, who were filming Exodus at the time. In 2013, I loved watching him relive the excitement and awe of Israel through his granddaughter's eyes. Burt never demanded and rather avoided the spotlight. So I'm sure a bunch of people standing in front of a room like this would make him profoundly uncomfortable. So I want to try to land this plane. But I need to say something to Mill first. Everyone in this room knows how hard Burt's final 17 days in the hospital were for him. But what many in this room may not realize is that your husband, who had had quadruple bypass surgery 40 years ago, was kept alive and thriving, not just alive, by three things: his life force, modern medicine, and maybe most of all, your love and devotion to him. As we reviewed pictures of Burt after he passed away, it wasn't hard to read in his eyes exactly how he felt about you. All that you gave and all that you did for Burt inspired him and inspires all of us. Without you, Burt may never have known me, his only son-in-law, who was awesome. His amazing granddaughter and his amazing granddaughters. Burt's life was the greatest gift you've given anyone. On March 13th, 1999, I went to see Burt and Marion to let them know I was going to propose to Marna. And assuming she said yes, like it or not, I was going to be joining the family. Well, if you know Burt, it won't surprise you. He cried. And then he stood up and he hugged me and he welcomed me to the family. Well, Burt, as I told you Saturday afternoon, I'm here. I've got this.
Over the last few days of my father's life, we introduced him to Spotify. He was in seventh heaven. During the heartbreaking days in the ICU, we found moments of joy and comfort. We played a few rounds of cards. We listened to songs that made him smile. And these were the same sounds that created the scenes of my childhood. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? Well, how many aspects of my father's life can I recall to help us all understand? The answers to Bob Dylan's questions were not clear or obvious, just as there's not one story that encapsulates the man who I could not be more proud to call my father. In deep and devoted partnership with my mother, my father gave me a life filled with blessings. He gave me the DNA to be filled with emotion and cry at the drop of a hat. And he instilled in me a strong Jewish identity and a sense of self. And he modeled what it means to be learned, to live with integrity, and to treat people with kindness. I adored my father, and I have strived my whole life to make him proud. I have been struggling to rewind and be able to retell his stories, our stories, but only days after his passing, my mind just circulates like a slideshow that we used to watch in our basement. Picture by picture, I flash back to the milestones of my youth and the many travels we shared. I can visualize his orangutan impressions in the San Diego Zoo, him riding a camel at the age of 80 in Morocco. I recall him putting me on his lap in May of 1984 to tell me that he had had a heart attack during the night and that my mom needed to take him to Michael Reese Hospital. That summer, he had quadruple bypass surgery. I was terrified that he would die. And for decades since, I have worried about his health. I never thought I would have my dad for almost 40 more years, and I have tried to treasure every unanticipated milestone that he was a part of, particularly welcoming Dan into our family, and most importantly, giving Hannah and Alana the love, adoration, and lessons that only a grandfather can provide. One of my earliest memories is in the basement of our house at 528 West Berry. The basement was lined with Butler Specialty Company bookshelves that housed his record collection, as well as his toy train. Guitar in hand and song sheet by his side, he entertained my friends at my earliest birthday parties. There were no costumes or prizes, just a room full of kids listening to my dad sing Puff the Magic Dragon. Whether at birthday parties and car rides or on our most recent road trips to Ann Arbor, he shared his passion for Peter, Paul, and Mary and many other folk music heroes. Music was a part of his DNA. His dad used to play the violin alongside my grandmother and my Aunt Pearl at the piano. My dad learned music at a young age after his cousin Bernice, who really was like a sister to him, gave him a ukulele. He then taught himself to play the guitar. He loved folk music, opera, classical music, and Jewish music. He loved going to services, and he had recordings of the most famous cantors in his record collection. He even loved the Haftorah trope and returned to Anshe Emet whenever he could to chant his bar mitzvah Haftorah, Yitro, even 50 and 60 years after the main event. With his ear for music, he also loved the study of music. He believed that music and the arts were part of a well-rounded person. When I was applying to college, he strongly encouraged me to pursue a liberal arts education. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and hoped to prepare for a career in business. My father believed that college was the 4 years of life where you could really explore your own passions. He said, I have the rest of my life to study accounting, management, marketing. College is the time to learn for the sake of learning and begin to explore the world. He encouraged me to take art history, music history, literature, and any kind of history. He had done a lot of recruiting for the sales team at Butler Specialty Company and always preferred to hire someone who was interesting and had the ability to think and carry on a conversation, rather than someone with the technical skills. And he didn't just study the arts, he wanted to experience them. As a subscriber to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra for over 50 years, he would bring the musical score to each performance so that he could follow along. Now, supposedly everybody did that back in the day, but I think he wanted to make sure the professionals didn't make any mistakes. I'm not sure he had a direct line to Barenboim, Muti, or any other conductor, but I guarantee that if he did catch an error, he was not shy about pointing it out. He genuinely wanted to help people be their best selves, and he did have a high standard that we all had to live up to. He applied that same discipline to the opera. Opera was one of his true passions, and one that my dad shared with some of his oldest friends, including Howard Goldberg, and then a hobby that my parents shared together from the time they first started dating. He loved Gilbert and Sullivan, and he wrote term papers in high school and college about them. He knew every word to the Pirates of Penzance, HMS Pinafore, and others, and he even sang along during our Spotify sessions in the ICU. My parents wanted to share their love of opera with me, and every season they purchased a third ticket to one performance at the Lyric. However, several weeks before the performance, we would have to sit down on the couch each night, hold the libretto in hand, and listen to the full opera while studying the libretto. Now, this was before subtitles and the age of getting a full history at the opera, so he thought I needed to understand the story, the characters, and be ready for any aria that I might fall in love with. Well, let me tell you, the perspective of a 10-year-old child, it felt like 30 minutes of torture every night. But as his only child, I couldn't bring myself to tell him or my mother how torturous it really was. The study, patience, and methodology that he brought to the arts were also quite apparent in his pursuit of golf. Though he was never able to lower his handicap below an 18, my father loved to play. He grew up as a child at Bryn Mawr Country Club, and he loved it there. It really was a second home. He played until he was in his 80s, and he had, as you heard from Dan, quite a practice swing. It was a multi-step practice swing that he insisted on doing before every single shot. It wasn't just at the tee-off. He would step up to the ball, he would take his grip, he would do a practice swing, then he would step behind the ball, reevaluate the angle, then he would reapproach the ball, do his little waggle, another practice swing, and then he finally took a swing. Each year, we played together in the father-child tournament on Father's Day, and we would have foursomes right on top of us. And I would keep trying to move him along and not disrupt the pacing of the course, but my father didn't care. He believed in his routines, and he brought a consistency to all that he did. He was not going to be intimidated or rushed because of anybody else. And there was no rushing Burt, as I'm sure my mother would be happy to share. He believed in giving time to the things he felt were important, and including some things that were maybe less important, like his daily solitaire challenge. He made time for family, always, and he believed deeply in the unit of marriage. He respected my mother and adored her, and he wanted me to have a strong and loving marriage, and it brought him great joy to see Dan and I build such a beautiful home, and it brought me great joy to see them grow to love each other. When Dan and I were first together, we were struggling to figure out how to spend the holidays with each of our families. My dad liked to share the story of his parents and the initial struggles they had trying to figure out where to spend Shabbat dinner. My grandmother was raised in an Orthodox home, and my grandfather used to travel on Friday nights to be with his siblings for Shabbat dinner. My grandparents didn't want to separate for Shabbat, but they each wanted to be with their families. My grandma Mary went to my great-grandfather, who was the son of the first Lubavitch rabbi in Chicago, and he told her that the most important thing is to be with your husband. Compromise is critical to a marriage. It is more important that you spend Shabbat together and that you spend it with family. So they ended up alternating. Every Friday night they were at home, and on the others they would travel to the Fainman family. It was important to my father that Dan and I also figure out that compromise, and it was important to him that I share in the Goldwyn family traditions. He loved Dan like a son. He loved the whole Goldwyn family and was so proud of the marriage that we had and the family we created. He would pass on these lessons in his own quiet way, not needing to preach or be in the spotlight, just by living his values: curiosity, integrity, family, community, love, and Jewish identity. And it was his Jewish tradition that provided a cadence to his days and his life, from those childhood Shabbat dinners to his joy leading the Passover Seder, to my childhood nighttime routine. The next picture in my mind takes me back to 528 West Berry. Each night, I would run and knock my father down on the bed. He would find ways to make it harder, and I would giggle even louder. With my mother by his side, we would climb up on the bed and say the Shema together. Then, when the lights were out, my parents would sing the words of Sunrise Sunset from Fiddler on the Roof. Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? Well, Dad, from this little girl that you carried, it has been the greatest honor and blessing to grow older under your guidance, support, and unconditional love. I am eternally grateful. And as we conclude this act of the beautiful opera of your life, we salute you with a heartfelt Yasher Koach and bravo. May your memory be a blessing for us all.
Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall? Wasn't it yesterday when they were small? Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. One season following another, laden with happiness and tears.
We often talk of the mitzvah of kibud av, kibud em, of honoring a father, honoring a mother. But today we were privileged to have a living lesson in that great mitzvah. To Rachel and Lana and Hannah, Dan and Marna, thank you. I know how proud Burt is in this moment. Anyone who knew Burt Fainman knew that he was a meticulous planner. He thought about everything that he did and his own method of accomplishing that task. From the way that he approached a golf ball, to his work at Butler's specialty, to the care that he extended to his employees, to the love that he shared with his family. Burt was a man with a plan. Dying was not part of that plan. He loved life so much. Loved Marion and his family. I don't think that Burt had any real intention of dying. So I imagine when Burt will find himself standing before the heavenly throne, leaving this world to the next, he will be a bit annoyed. And knowing Burt, he will not be afraid to express his feelings even to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. I also imagine God listening patiently to Burt because his passion for life was just so great. Now, according to the rabbis, God has a few questions for us. The first is whether or not you conducted your business with honesty and integrity. Burt's answer, I imagine, will include a bit about his background. Born and raised in Chicago, he attended Nettlehurst as an elementary school. He made lifelong friends there like Joel, who actually died on the same day as Burt and will be buried in the same cemetery just a few hours later. Burt was a curious student. He loved learning and was a wonderful researcher. He wanted to know the answer, whether it was a fact or an arcane rule in a game. Burt needed the true answer. And as Dan alluded to, I experienced this recently when offering a prayer for healing over the phone while I was in Jerusalem. When I came to his Hebrew name, I followed the tradition of, in a prayer for healing, to put the mother's name before the father's name. Burt stopped me in the middle of the prayer and said, "That's not right." I tried to explain the rabbinic reasoning, while I imagine the Holy One was patiently waiting for me to finish the prayer. Let's just say that Burt was an early subscriber to the Reagan theory Trust, but verify. Burt learned his ethics, his Menschlichkeit, his deep understanding of right and wrong, as well as his love for Judaism from his parents, Martin and Mary. He watched the way that his father conducted himself at what was then called Butler Baby, and came to understand the ethical way to comport yourself in business. He attended the University of Michigan, where he majored in business administration and minored in music. But he must have known that he was going to go into the family business, because at the University of Michigan, he took woodworking classes. Who knew? I imagine that Burt would tell God on high that he always conducted himself with integrity, that he knew all of his employees, his salesmen, and their families. He probably would be too modest to mention that he continued to care for their families even after their passings, making sure they were okay. The second question the rabbis imagine us being asked was whether or not you engaged in the study of Torah regularly. Burt was a proud Jew. He was raised in an Orthodox synagogue and truly loved the tradition and all aspects of Jewish life. And he was, as we've heard, passionate about Israel. But you should also know that Burt was the quintessential Schulmensch. He served on the Anshe Emet board, and as no one will be surprised, made his voice heard. Burt had high standards, expected the best from himself and from the synagogue as well, and was not shy when he felt that we had fallen short. I can say without question that Burt Fainman made Anshe Emet a better synagogue. He was meticulous about going to minyan at the time of his parents' yahrzeits and would speak so lovingly about them. Is it any surprise that Marna leads the ARC, one of the most important Jewish social service agencies in Chicago, or that she married Dan, whose work leading the JCRC fights for the Jewish people here in America and has a voice supporting the state of Israel? To this question, I know that Burt will offer a satisfying question. And while the rabbis offer other questions, there's one last one that I want to entertain with you today. Did you enjoy all that life has to offer? Did you appreciate the beauty around you? Did you taste its fruit and allow yourself to enjoy it? Burt enjoyed life to the fullest, whether it was at Bryn Mawr, on the golf course, listening to a symphony, experiencing a great opera, tasting a fine wine, a game of bridge. Burt enjoyed the beauty around him. But the greatest source of joy in his life was his family. Burt grew up with a small, loving family, as Rachel told us. He lost his parents at young ages. Marion, you were Burt's family. One rabbi once said of his wife, "Don't refer to my wife as Ishti. Don't say that she's my wife. Rather say she is Beiti. Say she's my home." Marion, you were Burt's home. And wherever you went, when he was with you, he was home. They met at the Young People's Division at the Federation. They became friends, and as Marion tells it, they became each other's Shiva dates. I'll say it again. They became each other's Shiva dates. When a friend's parent died, they would go together to comfort the family. Eventually, Burt asked Marion out on a date, and the rest is history. 53 years of marriage. And when I asked Marion what made their marriage a success, she said, as only Marion would, 2 words: yes, dear. The truth of the matter is they were in life what the liturgy called re'im ha'ahuvim, loving friends, not lovers alone, not friends alone, but this wonderful synthesis of these 2 ideas. They supported each other in life, they cared for one another, and they laughed with each other. Together, Burt and Marion made a life. They traveled around the world. They made wonderful, lasting friendships. They had a wonderful marriage, and as has already been said, Marion ensured that Burt lived as long as he did. No one could have a better advocate than Burt Fainman. Marna, you were the apple of his eye. I remember your bat mitzvah, seeing your father burst with pride. Your relationship with your father was a gift in so many ways. He wanted to be part of your life, but always encouraged you to find your own path. How proud Burt was of your many, many accomplishments. And Dan, you were the son that Burt never had. He meant it when he called you son. You shared such a special relationship, and you showed such deference and respect for Burt, a respect that he deserved, but you offered it so naturally and from the heart. And Alana, you made your grandfather proud. He reveled in your company, whether it was playing Monopoly or watching you in a sports event or a play. The fact that he got to visit Hannah at the University of Michigan, got to go into his old dorm, which is your dorm. He loved it. Someone once said, a grandfather is someone you can look up to, no matter how tall you grow. Your grandfather taught you with his life that stature is not measured in feet and inches, but in love, integrity, and the example that they set. How lucky you were to have Burt Fainman as your grandfather. I asked the family to give me words that best described Burt. Miriam said kind, loving, supportive. Dan, a kind shomer. Marna, a mensch. Hannah, constant. Alana, empathetic. That was Burt, and so much more. A man who in his life took the fire from the altar and allowed it to burn brightly in the way that he lived, in the way that he loved, in the way that he enjoyed all that life had to offer. We rise now for the memorial prayer as we pray that Burt Fainman will rest in peace.
El malei rachamim, shochein bamramim, hamsei menucha nichona, tachat kanfei hashchina, demalot kedoshim uteorim, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת בצלאל בן מרדכי שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, אז תראהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן.
O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and the pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Bezalel ben Mordechai, Burt Fainman, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring Burt under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of life, be God's possession, and may his repose be peace. Amen.